having me be. Dominique told me to touch on the same themes that I touched on last year, so for those of you who have either taken classes from me,
it's a review.
or have heard this before, I already apologize to Julia all the way in the back, so you may see some slides for the second time. But that doesn't mean that they're not any more timely given where we are right now. And I think a lot of people think that since 2016 we have a new problem. I think we probably have a problem that's a bit more pronounced, but it's a problem that's always been around, and it's a problem that hasn't just been around on the conservative side of things. As far as politicization of science is concerned, it's just been around on the liberal side as well. They just tend to touch on slightly different issues. So I want to start with this, and of course Galileo Galilei was one of the first people who really have what some people thought was a run-in or an instance where science and society had a run-in, but he was really yet a science communication problem, right? Because he was never told to not believe by the Catholic Church what he believed in or what he had found. He was told to not communicate those findings. That was really the issue. So I want to start with that a little bit. Why are we more in crisis? Maybe more in crisis now. I should have put a question mark there. Tell you a little bit about the research, especially for those of you who are first years, kind of the research that's happening in the department, a lot of it with Dominique and Mike Zenos, and even some of the people in this room. And then leave you with a few thoughts, with the last slide being kind of where I think we're going next, and what some of the challenges are. So first, the science interfacing crisis. And this is a slide I've used before, but it's as current as it's ever been. The idea that most science that we're dealing with in this country, and I'm sure other speakers either have talked about this or will talk about this, is super politicized. Stem cell research in Wisconsin, of course, has always been a highly politicized issue, with Tommy Thompson having been on both sides of the issue, having been, as a governor of Wisconsin, in favor of stem cell and very supportive of the work that we've been doing here at Wisconsin, but at the same time also as Secretary of Health and Human Services for the Bush 43 administration when they restricted federal funding to existing stem cell lines, which some people, by the way, argue also benefited Wisconsin tremendously because we owned a good chunk of those lines that were still open for research. Climate change, of course, is one that is an ongoing one, where a good chunk of the American public is directly at odds with scientific consensus, or with reality, however you want to frame that. Even obesity, Michelle Obama, when she at some point said, you know, we may want to eat more healthy, and our school children maybe should eat more healthy, got almost the same pushback that some people are getting right now when they're saying maybe we don't need gun violence in schools. Synthetic biology, exactly the same thing. In 2010, J. Craig Venter put synthetic DNA into a bacterial cell, and what he said created life from scratch. What some other people said he jump-started life, but one way or the other, what you ended up with is, here's your Frankenstein in the test tube. You see the imagery, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. On the left, we have GMOs, the same thing, and every time I speak in Germany, the Germans are not very happy with me because, of course, they love the idea that Americans don't believe in climate change, and it just fits their prior view of what America is like, and I point out to them that GMO is Germany's or is Europe's climate change, meaning the whole population is directly at odds with where the scientific consensus is on safety for human consumption. And so in spite of science saying there's absolutely no difference between traditionally grown crops and GMOs, Germans are convinced that there's something sinister and that all of the science is misleading, partly because it's corporate and so on and so forth. So exactly the same motivated reasoning that we're seeing in the US on climate. And then of course, most recent one, I can't remember if you mentioned it in the intro, but I served on a committee for the National Academies on the political, social, and scientific implications of human genome editing in the wake of CRISPR. So ways of editing the human genome that are faster, more efficient, safer than ever before, but at the same time also more precise in terms of the kinds of edits that we will be in the near future be able to do. And of course, you've seen some of the press coverage surrounding that, designer babies, eugenics, issues of race, of equity, of access, and so on and so forth. Problem is all of that, of course, is, as I said, it's not a new problem. And I really do think we need to stop this whole conversation about, you know, fake news is a new problem, it's 2016, and it's Trump, and it's anti-science. No, this country has been going toward where we are for a long time. And it has done that from a variety of things. Number one is scientific and when nano first came out, nanotechnology, so this was late 90s, Neil Lane and Clinton thought up the National Nanotech Initiative, multi-agency effort on modifications at the nano level, right? So this is 1,000 times smaller on the micro level, and basically said we're going to invest. Bush 43 more than quadrupled funding for this, around this idea, the idea that we are in the middle of a revolution that they call nano-bio-info-cogno, or short NBIC. So that most new areas of research are actually interface of these areas. So if that's nano and biology, if that's information sciences, AI and other things, and biology and synbio, but they all share the same thing. They're super complex, nobody learned about them in school. They're interdisciplinary, right? So it's not that you took at some point some AP nanotechnology class or some AP synbio class. It just didn't happen. So for most of us, we're picking this stuff up as we go. Number two is we're picking this stuff up, meaning the research and the scientific side of it, we're picking that up as we're dealing with consumer end products. For nanotechnology, we had 1,600 products on the market by the time people even realized that there was a big investment. As I said, Bush 43, who cut funding for most scientific agencies, more than quadrupled funding for the National Nanotech Initiative over the 8 years it was in office. And then, of course, most of these technologies have fairly manageable technical risks. Eventually, if you go to Phoenix right now, you're going to be surrounded, Phoenix, Arizona, you're going to be surrounded by self-driving cars everywhere, right? The Ubers, the Googles, the whatever. And same thing in Palo Alto and elsewhere. Those will be sorted out. What won't be sorted out, what's much more difficult to sort out, are the ethical, legal, social implications, or what sometimes is referred to as ELSI issues. So think about this for self-driving cars. Some car salesmen will have to tell parents at some point that they're purchasing, when they buy a car for their daughter, for their son, that they're buying a car that is programmed to kill their daughter or their son. Because it is. It's a very narrow slice, but it is, right? So you right now, today, you're driving black ice, car spins out of control, there's a bunch of options. Here's a grandmother with her walker on the sidewalk. There's a class of kindergartners. Which one am I taking out? Because I'll have to take one of them out. And the car needs to make that decision because it's self-driving, right? So it makes a moral choice about which one it takes out. But there's, of course, also the scenario where the best option, morally or economically or however that algorithm is programmed, is to take out the driver. That's the best scenario. So, well, it is. I mean, hands down. And so the point being, the question is, are we ready for a car that is, this is one of the products that's designed to kill us under certain circumstances, period. It is. And not by choice. We're not going to make that call at the moment. The car will make that call. The second thing about it that's kind of interesting is, so this is a stop sign, and it's inside because it's at Carnegie Mellon. And the stop sign has just these little white and black bars put on them. And what that is it basically, it hacks the sign so that the cameras and the neural networks that read this sign in the car actually interpret this stop sign as a 45 miles per hour sign. So weirdly, the cameras that we currently have in self-driving cars look at this sign and they interpret it as 45 miles per hour. And again, here's your grandmother with a walker, and that car is going 45 miles an hour right through the intersection. Right? So these things can all be hacked, and it can be fairly easily hacked, not in a online Russian trolls doing X, Y, Z to reprogram the cars, but simply putting a bunch of stickers on a stop sign. So a lot of these issues have implications that we're not even thinking through, so that's problem number one and why it's gotten more complicated. And problem number two is, and this is, both positive and negative, these are some of the most prominent science writers that we had. Why do I put them up here? Because they're the ones, when I said we didn't learn about this stuff in school, they're the ones who take 20 years of nano research, 20 years of synbio, 20 years of CRISPR research, and translate it into 300 words that I can read at the breakfast table, that I can quickly, it explains to me why it makes sense as a consumer, why I should worry about this, why regulations make sense, and so on. Rick Weiss used to write for the Washington Post. He now works for AAAS after stints at DARPA and elsewhere. Barnaby Fader used to work for the New York Times. He went to divinity school, became a priest. Miles O'Brien for CNN, got laid off with a whole CNN science staff, then lost an arm in a freak accident in Asia. Ken Weiss, LA Times, now took a buyout from the LA Times maybe 2-3 years ago, sitting in his house overlooking Santa Barbara, California, and writing books. And then the last one is Dan Bergano, who used to be the last guy standing, and I'm saying in some degree good, like all white guys, right? All white guys, for USA Today, and now is writing for the third largest science newsroom in the US, and I know some of you know what that is because I've mentioned it in class, which is BuzzFeed Science. Third largest newsrooms for science in the US. And they were the second largest until Bezos took over the Washington Post and reinvested heavily in science writing, and Laura Helmuth and others are rehiring, but still the third largest, BuzzFeed, brought to you by the people, the top 10 list of how to, I don't know, break up with your boyfriend, girlfriend, brought to you by Trojan. So this is basically the situation that we're in. I know some of you have seen this. I've seen this quote, and it's a quote that I still like because it pisses people off. And it did when he first said it. Actually, the timing is perfect. It was almost exactly 11 years ago, because it was at the AAAS meeting, American Association for the Advancement of Science, out in the West Coast. They just met in Austin, Texas last week. And he spoke to a room of scientists and said, you guys have a marketing problem. You're just not very good at communicating, period. And you need to, if you like it or not just, this is not just communicating the science itself, it's communicating all the political, economic implications, the ethical, legal, social implications along with it. And unless you figure it out, you're going to go by the wayside. And I think he's absolutely right. Of course, it's easier said than done in a world where, and I think UW communication sometimes does the same things. Meaning they assume we're still communicating by press release, they assume we're still communicating toward journalists who then will write up our stories, and we're still communicating toward a local TV market, basically. And the answer, of course, is that's true to a degree, but this is just looking at some AP NORC data, so it's down at the University of Chicago, collected where people, this is a question, they ask it for different areas, they ask it for cooking, for politics, for whatever. This is just where they get most often their information on science and tech. So the area that we're talking about here, and you can already see the labels down here and how I've ordered them. There are multiple mentions, obviously, which is why they don't add up to 100. First stop, and that corresponds to any other data collection. If you want to find out something about science, you Google it, period. I do too, that's the way it is. Facebook, number 2. We're now at an age, or at a stage, where 7 out of 10 Americans report that they use social media, and Facebook in particular, as a news source. And 2 out of 10, meaning 1 out of 5, use it frequently on a regular basis as their main news source. Word of mouth, national TV, and even for national TV, if people use it for science and tech, a lot of it is on demand, right? So a lot of it is not in traditional real-time formats anymore, and then of course you Google News, your Reddits, your news aggregators, whatever those might be, Flipboard, whatever else. All right, so this is the situation that we're in, and I want to show you how some of that is not all bad, because, of course, I told you the translators are going away, people's news diets change, science has become more complicated, it has these ethical implications, but some of the work that we've done has tried to figure out, well, what does that do to people overall? And of course, there's a huge kind of enthusiasm at the beginning meaning 90s, for some of you, is before, not quite before you're born, but close enough. The idea of that this internet thing would bring about this new information commonwealth, right? It used to be libraries, and I just spent the weekend doing the first round of interviews for our new Vice Provost for Library Affairs, and you can tell even from the kinds of applications that we're getting that the world is changing from where it used to be. It used to be that we all need to have these on-site huge libraries that you go to and you find things, and now a lot of that is completely virtual. I can now find more information than I was able 20 years ago, even if I could take the UCLA, the Harvard, and the Wisconsin library and put them all together. I couldn't as efficiently find all the information as I can now, on the spot, right now, super easy and in real time. So that's absolutely true. And number two, what's possible now is that I can also connect with people. Even if I'm not making sense, I can crowdsource the question. I can look at people who've written up scientific issues in ways that are more accessible to me than they would be from the New York Times or from Nova Science or some other things that most Americans never use. So some evidence shows that this is actually has been working. I just want to show you one, and some of you have seen this, but I'm going to show it again. One of the most persistent pieces of misinformation is that Barack Obama is a Muslim. Right? That is 1 in 4 or 1 in 5 Americans continue to believe that. But not that there would be anything wrong with the fact that he is a Muslim, even if he was, but he just happens to not be one. Right? So that's kind of, it's just false, and it has always been false, and everybody could have easily known that. But we also wanted to ask a second one, and so we wanted to know where that comes from. The second one we wanted to know, and this is Sarah Palin had to do a double take because, of course, it's the comparison to Tina Fey. And so what we wanted to know is, Sarah Palin at some point allegedly said, "I can see Russia from my house." The tricky part with that is it's a little bit like Barack Obama being a Muslim, meaning it's not true. She actually never said this. She was asked by Katie Couric, I believe, in an interview why she had foreign policy experience when she ran with John McCain. And her answer was, because I was governor of Alaska, and Alaska is geographically located really close to Russia, so there are parts of Alaska where you can see Russia, which is technically true. Doesn't give you necessary foreign policy experience, but that's all she said. Tina Fey, of course, turned that into "I can see Russia from my house" on Saturday Night Live. Yeah. And if you're honest, most of us in this room thought that Sarah Palin said, "I can see Russia from my house." Most of us did, right? Which puts us exactly where the rest of Americans are. In our survey, 1 in 5 Americans think that Barack Obama is a Muslim. 7 in 10 are convinced that Sarah Palin. And we gave them different options, right? We said Katie Couric, we said Sarah Palin, we said Tina Fey. They could pick from 4, and still 7 out of 10 picked Tina Fey. So, what we wanted to know is, where does that come from? And this goes back to my initial comment about misinformation, right? We were saying, oh, this is all new and fake news and whatever. No, that's actually been around for quite a while. And this is not even the first time there's been misinformation for a long time, and we can talk about this more later. But what we did is basically, we calculated, and when I say we, I mean the SciMed research group, and Dominique is involved, and a whole bunch of other people. Down here, how much do people use traditional news, comedy, and the web, and then how wrong are they? What's the probability of them being wrong in the Tina Fey question? And here's the interesting thing, the more traditional news, so the thing that we would now describe as not fake news, right, that CNN, that CBS and others pride themselves on being real traditional news, the more you watch them, the more wrong you get. In fact, that's not that different from comedy, where it makes total sense, right? If I watch Colbert when he was still on the air, if I watch Stewart, if I watch Oliver and those people, of course I'm going to be more likely to believe that because they keep repeating this and harping this for ratings. The interesting thing is, and these are not quite linear, but the interesting thing is the more you use the web, the more likely you are to actually get an accurate take. Lots of different interpretations for that. And this is controlling for the other types of media use. This is important, right? So this is controlling for ideology, for everything underlying. I'm just showing you the probabilities plotted here. The interesting thing is, partly that's because you can look up the primary clip, partly because you can actually see who said what, and you can actually follow it up, which I can't do in the more linear formats, traditional news formats. But partly it's because there is actually both these, the ability to seek information and the ability to interact in Web 2.0 type things, which is not new anymore, but the ability to interact and say, hey, that was actually wrong. And in most of our Facebook feeds, if you look at it right now, that somebody will post something and then, somebody else, oh, have you looked at Snopes? It's not real, right? So you have this corrective function built in, which sometimes works really well. So those were the plus sides. Now I want to give you some, I wanted to, one quick set of why traditional news may actually have the opposite effect. 2 examples. One is Fox News, which at some point in 2012, when Sarah Palin thought about running again, this time as candidate by herself against Obama in his re-election campaign, Fox News at the time employed Sarah Palin as a commentator. That's really important, because when they announced that Sarah Palin was running, they used a picture of Tina Fey by accident. So this is literally a picture of Tina Fey up here saying Sarah Palin is running. So, hence the idea, but then of course we also had a Puerto Rican paper when they talked about meetings between Bibi Netanyahu and not Donald Trump, used again an SNL picture, right? So it's even traditional media got roped into these issues. So that maybe, it's not evidence, but it's at least an episodic explanation of some sort of why that traditional news trajectory was toward more misinformation. But there are downsides, or at least weird potential downsides, and I want to talk about two of them. One, the idea of contextualized news, and some of you have been involved in this research. So the idea that 30 years ago, 20 years ago, when I read the newspaper, I sat there by myself, I read the paper, said bang. Now I'm sitting there, by the time I get to the article, I already know how often it's been retweeted, it's surrounded by comments, it's surrounded by Facebook likes. I get social cues about how good this article is, or how interesting, or how popular this article is. And we know from lots of research that social cues matter. Right? If a lot of people do something, that's why we do it too. That's why we're wearing skinny jeans again. This is why the 80s came back, the 90s came back. There's no good reason for that. There's no reason why Uggs went away and Tim's came in. It's just, yes, absolutely, it just is because other people did it, right? Same thing is true for news, for our interpretation of news. Tells us if it's appropriate, if it's relevant, if it's popular, whatever else. So what we wanted to know is basically, what we did is we put up a blog post, and it tells you how long this study was, how long ago this study was. That was 2010. So this is a blog post. We took the Vancouver Sun because we wanted to make sure that we don't have perceived ideological biases. So New York Times is seen as more left-leaning, the Post more left-leaning, the Wall Street Journal more right-leaning. We assumed that they would be more neutral. Everybody saw, basically, we did a large survey, can't remember, 3,500 people, something like that. And we kept the article constant. And this is important for journalism, right? So the blog post itself stayed totally constant. What we changed is down here is the nature of comments. Even the comments, the content was the same. So basically, people saying it's about safety of whatever, nanosilver, so it's a nanomaterial. And people are saying, oh, I think it's really bad environmentally, and others, no, I disagree, it's actually really good, it has all these advantages. The only difference between the two conditions that I'm going to show you is that condition one, basically people agreed in a civil, academically civil fashion, and the other condition, they yelled and screamed at each other, called each other names, and so on. So, oh, I disagree with you, there's no evidence for that. What kind of an idiot are you? There's absolutely no evidence for that. Right? So that kind of difference. So civil, uncivil. And the cool thing, or the interesting thing, and this is really think this through also, well, let me describe the results first and then talk about interpretation. One is that the more uncivil the comments were, just down here, the more bias people saw in the article up here. They each read the exact same piece. Right? So if you're a journalist and you write a perfectly neutral article, and people start yelling and screaming at each other afterwards, subsequent readers will see your article as biased, even though you have absolutely no control over that in many ways. And number two is they also were more polarized in how they saw risks. So the people who saw risks before were even more convinced that there were risks, and people who saw benefits were even more convinced that there were benefits after. So think this through in terms of some of the strategy that we're seeing some of our politicians engaging right now as far as the social and social media commentary they provide, right? And creating this very explicit kind of yelling and screaming and creating potentially some of the exact same results as far as if there's smoke, there must be some fire and something must be wrong. And I would love to know who the 45,000 people are who like every single tweet that our current president puts out. I mean, without fail, there's always about 45,000 people who will like that thing. But having said this, the implications for journalism, of course, are unbelievable. This is the example from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, who picked this up first. Classic science coverage, well hidden, split across multiple pages. Nobody's going to read it. And this is my point from earlier. If I looked at that same article online, it shifted to the health section. But more importantly, I know immediately that 171 people, a couple hours in, commented on it. I know that 1,000 people recommended it, that somebody even Pinterested it. And it surrounded, and this was actually the beauty, it was surrounded by comments that made our point, right? It was surrounded by comments that were, I mean, this whole idea that we call this the nasty effect, saying if you have nasty comments, you'll see negative impact. So these were just my three favorite ones. About 99% of us, that is Dominique and I guess, and the people who were involved in this, we must all be socialists and communists, which for French people is true, but for Germans definitely is not. The University of Wisconsin professors who were bewildered by science opinions being questioned rather than being accepted as is. So, right, so this is not just misunderstanding the study, but also shooting the messenger. And then, of course, the one since we're both or foreigners, everybody who comes to this conclusion must hate God and country. And so, but the beauty of this, I mean, it was actually really nice because it's very seldom do you do a study and then somebody just illustrates your point in how they react to the study. That happens very rarely, and this, I know I showed this in my undergrad course, by far, and I'm not kidding, the best summary, and I don't know if Dominique agrees, but by far the best summary of our social science, meaning of the methods and the design, was in the Onion. And these people, I'm assuming, I don't know that for a fact, especially since it's going to be taped, I smoke a lot of weed, and that's why they're so funny in part, but they definitely got the social science right. And of course the funny thing is they also have, for some weird reason, especially the Elite Club has a problem with the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, so the headline is awful online comments or understanding of news, reports local news site filled with awful online comments, which is what they were referring to. But one way or the other, it was all over the place. We ended up writing about the New York Times, Dominique and I, which then kicked off a bunch of not knee-jerk reactions, I think very carefully actually, especially on the part of popular science, deliberative decisions to basically shut down their comment section. And they're saying two things, right? Number one is if negative comments influence the perception of our journalistic product, that's bad. If people yell and scream and then it undermines the credibility of our product, that's not good. And number two, if it polarizes people and risks, that's even worse. So, and it's really expensive to do 24/7 monitoring and moderation of results. That of course kicked off yet another debate in the New York Times where people accused us of being anti-free speech, which of course was not true, but nonetheless. But then at some point the dam broke, and the Sun-Times in Chicago, Reuters started killing off their comments, CNN killed off comment sections, and this one is still my favorite because Reddit, when they created Upvote, their news site, started and didn't allow any comments whatsoever. PubMed, for a while, as some of you know, started having a comment section, so kind of post-peer review comments, and they just shut that down. So that just happened, I think, a week or two ago that PubMed shut that down. I think there's also, this research is also a really good example of the kinds of work that we, and I'm trying to get a sense of how far in, okay, of the kinds of work that we very often in the social sciences do that I don't think is as application focused as it should be. So in other words, we very often do research for the sake of doing basic research, and I think that's great, that's important. But when I talk to journalists, and I literally spoke to journalists in Oslo in Germany, and just to switch countries and cities here, in Norway and Germany, and in the US, elsewhere, we had people from some French documentary filmmakers come out here to tape it, and they all asked, so what's the solution? And of course our answer was, well, we haven't looked at that. We only identified the problem, we never looked at really at solutions, and I think that's part of what in the social sciences we often don't do as well. So since then we've actually replicated this. We've replicated the effect with subsequent data collections, and I don't have a better graph of this yet, but I just want to show you really quickly at what I think is a very cool set of solutions, and also cost-effective solutions, because most news organizations barely have time or have money to keep science writers on staff. They certainly don't have money to do 24-hour, 24/7 monitoring of comments and moderation of comments. So replication of the effect, civil comments, uncivil comments, and then perception of bias, right? And you have this in the classic condition. This is the original nasty effect, is this line. What we did is then we turned the nasty effect into 4 conditions, so civil, uncivil. But then we also created 2 conditions. One is uncivil and fake, basically fake moderation. There was just one line in there that says this comment has been removed by a moderator. And then, again, unmoderated. And so you have 2 by 2. And what you see is the moment you have this is not, they weren't real moderated. There was nobody who moderated. It was only like a cue that there's moderation, that a parent is in the room, basically. And the moment you give that cue that a parent is in the room, the nasty effect flattens out and becomes much, and actually not significant at that. So there's some, and again, we can talk about the morality and the ethics of that, right? Of actually faking your readers into believing that somebody's reading their comments. But the upside, of course, is that it takes away what I would consider a deeply undemocratic effect, meaning that us not being able to deliberate in a civil fashion influences our perception of news, and in an age where some people very intentionally, I think, try to undermine the value of news. I think that's something that's worth deliberating. So I just wanted to show you that as something that just came out. I just checked it before. It's still not in print, but it's coming out, unfortunately. So the last thing, I think it's the last thing. Maybe I have two more, but I promise you I will end on this with the last slide. Is what I would call preference-based tailoring. And preference-based tailoring is really something that's the new normal. Laura Helmuth, who is running the science section of the Washington Post, will tell you quite openly she has moved to levels of journalistic administration and editorship where her job is no longer to write, her job is to basically get people to do the writing and to do a lot of A/B testing. Most newspapers now, the New York Times, the Washington Post, everybody else, all other news organizations do this all the time, meaning an article goes out in 5 different versions at the same time. So the article's written, gets slightly different lead, different headline, goes out real time, gets randomly assigned to anybody who goes to the website. So classic ABCD testing, right? And then I know within 5, 10, 20, 30 minutes, I know how often it's been tweeted, shared, whatever, how well it's doing with that headline versus that headline versus that headline. And in the end, I know the New York Times just announced that they see another 10 years of print. So let's say the New York Times still uses print. But eventually, they won't use print anymore. But even the print is influenced by those metrics. But most certainly, what the headline is that ultimately is being used for broad rollout is influenced by this. So the idea that we're doing real-time testing, and Facebook obviously does this with hundreds of thousands of people every day, where every time you go to your feed, you're randomly assigned to some form of A/B testing and ongoing experiments, which is why the algorithm keeps changing, and you can actually not replicate any study for Facebook that you've ever done, because the algorithm will change by the time you're done. But number 2 is the idea that that's not just aggregate level. It's not just at an aggregate level, it's actually done. We've shifted from a model where 20 years ago, magazines were the way to get you to, so there's Cigar Smoker magazine or whatever, I have an idea, and Wine Enthusiast and Fishing magazine and Gun Enthusiast magazine, and cable did the same thing, right? Kind of did it basically by segment. Can I reach that 18 through 25-year-old segment, that 40 through 50-year high disposable income segment? We don't need that anymore because now we're doing micro-targeting. We're doing what's called narrow casting. So broadcasting means CBS News, ABC sits there and they all broadcast the same news to 320 million Americans, 330 million Americans. Now we're narrow casting. We take all the available news and we narrow cast it toward you as a person, based on you tapping your screen 1,000 times, all the location data, every article you've ever read, every picture you've ever clicked on Facebook, every social login, every website you've ever logged in with your Google login, your Facebook login gets merged into one big gigantic data set that basically knows more about you than you know about yourself. And people typically say, well, that's for banner ads, and it's like, yes, that's absolutely true, it's for banner ads, but nobody makes money off of banner ads. It's actually to tailor experiences elsewhere and to sell your data, right? So that the time you go to hotels.com and you book a hotel room, you will get an offering that is tailored toward that shadow profile that's underlying your various social media profiles. And if I go to Amazon.com, then of course all the data that's being collected there is going straight into the Washington Post, because of course that's how you get your that's where Bezos is using some of those data to tailor news toward you. And that's not good or bad, that's just the way it is, right? We've always tried to do this. This is not a new development. This is why we created soap operas. This is why Procter & Gamble created entertainment television, to place advertisement to particular segments. That's how the paid media system works. So this is not new, it's just perfecting it to a point where now we're tailoring toward individuals. Why is that so important? Because, of course, not just is it that we're being tailored to, it actually plays to our weaknesses as human beings. Again, yet another Canadian stimulus, the Ottawa Citizen, basically trying to figure out if we have an option as individuals, when we read science news, a non-politicized science, this is nanotechnology, are we going to take as cues learning more, or are we taking as cues our partisanship? And given how I set it up, you can already see where I'm probably going with this. So we basically gave people, we said, we're going to ask you a bunch of questions about this afterwards, large survey. Here's a few follow-up things that you can look at, a few articles in preparation for those questions. And each article randomly is assigned to it, so these varied for every respondent. Had a liberal cue, MSNBC, a conservative cue, Fox, and a neutral cue, Canadian Broadcasting. And so what we wanted to know is, do people go to content and certain types of risk versus benefit content, or are they going by political ideology? And here's the sad news, and again, this is not a conservative or liberal problem, this is just us. Very liberal, very conservative. How likely are you to select MSNBC? And it's very simple, right? If I'm a liberal. And again, this is controlling for content. Meaning I have the choice to go after content or after ideology, and I go after ideology. And of course, conservatives do the exact same thing. Right? It works in both directions. Which means what Facebook, what Google, what every single company under the sun right now is trying to do, meaning micro-targeting and narrowcasting toward us, falls onto the most fertile ground. Meaning our tendency fest into 1950s to self-select. This is selective exposure. We've known this from psychology since the 50s. So we're just feeding into it because, of course, we want to stay where we're surrounded by news that we like. I don't want to be told every day that Trump is the greatest president if I'm not a conservative. And I don't want to be told every day that he's an idiot if I am a conservative. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to self-select into environments that feed my triangle, my consonance triangle, where everything makes sense. And I'm going to spend more time there, which of course is where Facebook is making money. The more time you spend there, the more time you spend on Google, the more time you spend within any ecology that Apple or Google or anyone provides to you. That's why Apple makes it so difficult to switch away from their devices and from their everything world. And of course, to just add one last thing here, in our own biases, and this is a really important piece of the puzzle here, is the idea of motivated reasoning. And you've heard this hopefully before, and if not, let me quickly walk you through it. And I put these two here because it was just a perfect example, right? I mean, and you, to this day, you have these discussions with people about what happened in the last election and why they voted for Hillary Clinton or didn't vote for Hillary Clinton, or and some people were convinced that that's the greatest thing ever, and some people were convinced and still are, she has to be locked up, even though apparently some of those demonstrations with the metal cages were funded by the Russians, as we now heard from the FBI. But basically the idea is that any information that comes our way, all of us, not just partisans, all of us will interpret in different ways. Why? Because we engage in these what's called confirmation or disconfirmation biases. That is different from the previous slide. It doesn't mean that we each select the information that we like. It means that if I line up 10 pieces of information in front of you, that we all agree, we all say, yeah, we know they're true, absolutely. Then each one of us will still select a different subset of those 10 when we form our attitudes. And we will we will basically weigh more heavily that information that fits our prior beliefs, and we will discount that information. We know it's true, but we will not use it as heavily or weigh it as heavily when we come to decisions. So that's disconfirmation bias or confirmation bias. And ultimately, and this is I think the really important term, is what's called biased assimilation. We don't adjust our views to reality, we adjust reality to our views. Right? That's what biased assimilation means. I will weigh information more heavily and information about reality if it fits my priors. So I'm basically taking reality and adjust it to what I already believe, rather than going out and really neutrally processing all information. And I do that because I like who I am, I like what I believe in, I've always believed in that. And now you're coming to me and you're saying you need to rethink everything, your religious views, your ideological views, your memberships to social groups. And I'm telling you, you're wrong. So what do? I say, well, no, I'm going to just reweigh that slightly. For science, the problem with that is that in politics that may make sense, right? Think about abortion, unborn life, and when life starts, and already I think we have science bleeding into it, but we also have lots of ideology, religion, fair, moral arguments to be made. But climate change is different, right? It's factually true, the end. And so the idea that for science we have the exact same processes, meaning the same scientific facts, mean different things to different people, becomes a problem. And of course, Wisconsin being, as always, one of the more ideologically expressive places in the country. When Governor Walker cut $300 million from the UW budget to give it to the Milwaukee Bucks to build a new stadium, a lot of people were really upset and said, he doesn't understand that by cutting matching money from actually the Great Lakes Bioenergy Institute over there and others, he's going to hurt the state economy, because all this research on biofuels that we're doing is really good for the state economy. Well, that depends on how you look at the world, and so we actually had a survey in the field. This is with Brett Shaw and others. We had a survey where we looked at, and this is again controlling out all the demographics and everything, but down here, information intake. Do people get a lot of information, little information, or a lot of information, and do they see positive effects in the state economy or negative effects in the state economy? And for Democrats, motivated reasoning, biased assimilation, confirmation biases. The more biofuels they hear, the more information they hear, the more excited they get about the state economy. It doesn't matter, TV, newspapers, positive effect. Republicans, the more information they get, the more negative they get. And actually, the more informed they get, the more opposed they are. And again, these are not right or wrong, either one. It simply says the more information I feed in, the more polarized people get. So it's exactly the opposite of what you would expect, right? And this is not, we're not the only ones who've shown this. Other people have shown this for issues ranging from climate change to nanotechnology. They label it slightly differently, if that's Dan Kahan or others. Brandon Nyhan on vaccines has shown this, that people have the exact same polarizing effect when you feed them CDC information on vaccines. And they dig in even more, and they're even less likely to vaccinate their children. So classic motivated reasoning, and something that's likely to become worse. And this is the US. These are the most recent data from Pew, 1994, Gingrich, response to the first 2 years of Bill Clinton. Republicans are outraged over what he's done. Even then, we're still pretty close together. 2004, you have Bush running for re-election, not convincing anybody that he was a great president, turning out 9 million people in Ohio, Florida, convincing them there's a culture war. We're still pretty close together. This is where we are now in 2017. And again, for those of us on the more left-leaning side who'd like to judge people on the right, the extremism on the liberal side is actually pretty well developed in terms of where we are and how strong a prior and a tribal identity it becomes for us. Right? And it's really difficult to find common ground for those things. We're clearly not the only ones, and by the way, there's great data that Stanford just put out that Chantal Angar is about to publish hopefully soon, where they do implicit association tests, right? So these tests that measure your racism without you really noticing it, or other biases, and they basically show that political ideology now, as far as implicit biases go, polarizes us more than race even, which is a really powerful illustration. We're not the only ones. The Netherlands has had their run-ins with really fringe groups becoming stronger and stronger. And think about the implications for motivated reasoning, meaning different pockets living in completely different realities. France, Marine Le Pen, of course, just barely missing the thing in the end, and in Germany, of course, with, not of course, but certainly as far as fascism goes, have a long track record, but most recently the AfD, ultra-right fringe group, doesn't believe in climate change, doesn't believe in a lot of scientific consensus. Where are we going next? This is Jim Vandehei, who actually came out of the UW system. He's a graduate of, I would say Oshkosh, but that's probably not true, but one of the smaller schools. Worked for the Post, founded Politico, and then left Politico recently for Axios, the online-only news provider. And one of the things he said when he created Axios is actually, I think, a really interesting statement. This is a traditional news guy, right? And what he said basically is, from the New York Times piece, the future will depend on tailoring to the nth degree, of giving people exactly what they want. But the second part is actually maybe even more important for science, and that is, don't spend money on what people don't want. And it's not what you tell me you want, it's what I know from every single click and every single movement on any website you've ever made. So if you're telling me that you really care about science, you better have looked at science, you better have purchased science magazines, you better have searched on Amazon and everywhere else for science, because otherwise I will know and you will not get that content anymore, because I cannot afford to do it. So it's actually a really, it basically is reality catching up with us. And if you ask in surveys, even a few years ago, how interested people were in science, you get about 15% saying, I'm very interested in science. 15, 1-5. And that's people who think they have to say that to interviewers. Right? There's a huge social desirability bias in there. So this doesn't necessarily bode well for the future. So a couple of concluding thoughts. Oh, I'm going way late. I think the need for us to build whole new competencies. And I said earlier, I don't think we have a problem with fake news in the sense that people are not able to spot fake news. I think that's a very narrow slice of the problem. I think given everything that we just heard, or that I just told you, it's really about our willingness to actually spot fake news on both sides. And that's true for liberals, right? If you see something that's really, there's somebody in the Trump White House who's just admitting to X, Y, Z, I believe that because I'm a liberal. And if I'm a conservative, I believe everything that they say, everything bad about Nancy Pelosi. So it's really our willingness to, and the willingness for us to invest effort into this. Research on that largely out of places like Northwestern and Penn on social accountability and cognitive tuning. What these people are trying to show in psychology and communication, they're trying to say, how can I force your brain out of this confirmation bias? How can I force you to look at both sides of the issue? And one of them is social accountability, meaning that I know that I will be exposed to people who disagree with me. And as a result, and this is Mike Roloff's work at Northwestern, what he's saying is, if I know that, let's assume I know that you guys all have very different attitudes. I come in here and we're arguing over gun control. I will, in preparation for this discussion, I will read news much more carefully because I know that some people are going to push against my arguments in different directions. So cognitive tuning says people who routinely have interactions with non-like-minded others, with others that are not like them, or don't think like them, will read news more carefully in preparation for those potential discussions. Especially, again, in settings where opinions are diverse. Really quickly, a study that we did on that, and then I really need to wrap up, but really quickly, what we did is we put a bunch of undergrads in the lab, and we told them, here's some info on nano, we will make you afterwards, we'll put you in a discussion group. They never had to discuss. We just told them that they would. Actually, they did have to just do a fake discussion so they wouldn't go and tell their friends who would come in later that they didn't have to discuss. So they did have a discussion, but the discussion didn't matter. All we cared about is the threat of discussion, cognitive tuning, right? I'm threatening you that you will be in the situation, talking to others that we left undefined, to others that have different views from yours, to others that have similar views or no discussion. And then we led them into a gated information environment where we said, general news about science, and then editorials that have kind of both sides of the argument. So where you actually engage both sides of the argument. These are the three discussion groups, and this is what happens compared to the no discussion group, as far as percentage of first stop, right? In all the discussion groups, people are more likely than in the no discussion group to go to editorial and opinion pages, number one. By far the highest number, people in the opposing group. So they haven't discussed yet. All they think in their head is, oh, I need to go and actually discuss this with people who don't agree with me. What do? They go to the editorials and opinions to basically bolster their arguments on both sides of the issue. Is that evidence? No. Is it circumstantial evidence that this may be going in the right direction? Absolutely. And so where we're going with this is really kind of, can we build environments where we're breaking out of our silos? Because it's actually good for us. It's not just good for us because it sounds good, it's good for us because it has outcomes that are democratically important. And actually, you know what, for the sake of time, I'm going to leave this off because this is a little bit inside baseball for communication, and so that way I'm just going to stop here. There's one more slide, and I'd be happy to share them. But that way we at least have a little bit more time for discussion because I went too long. Thank you so much.